With his own diary tapes and other unique recordings, former Cabinet Minister Tony Benn reflects on his encounters with the royal family.
In Britain, we don't elect our head of state, or for that matter our second chamber, the House of Lords. Britain is a monarchy, and the ministers sometimes meet the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, and when we do, get some insight into what they really think. One occasion was in 1968, when I found myself sitting next to the Duke at a lunch. Friday the 23rd of February, up very early and by helicopter to Winfrith for the opening of the steam-generating heavy water reactor. I found myself sitting next to the Duke of Edinburgh at lunch, and we fell to talking about various things. We began by talking about Europe, and it was very evident that he was not a keen European and thought that British opinion would be opposed to our joining Europe now that the opportunity had passed. I explained that I really would be a federalist. This worried him enormously, no doubt because the royal family wouldn't have much of a place in a federal Europe. Then we talked a little bit about the institution of government, and he said he thought there should be a much smaller cabinet. And on the whole, his views about the structure of government were quite sensible. So then I switched over to the monarchy, and I asked him how he thought the monarchy would work over the next 25 years. He said he thought the first thing to do was to get rid entirely of the Commonwealth angle, by which he meant the Queen being Queen of Canada as well as Queen of Britain. He said they don't want us, and they'll have to be a republic or something. Next, he wanted to try and connect the monarchy more directly with ministers, and thought the Prime Minister's audience with the Queen should broaden out to include other ministers so they could explain things to her. I said I didn't think that would help at all, as when this government got even less popular, it would just involve the monarchy with us. And he said, well, he wasn't thinking of the monarchy, but of the national interest, and that if the monarchy didn't meet the national interest, he would opt out altogether. Quite what he meant by that, I don't know. Then he said he thought that the ombudsman ought to have been put in the royal household in order to make the monarchy seem closer to the people. And I said I thought this was absolute nonsense. But it was altogether quite an interesting discussion. He is a thoughtful and intelligent person. It was the first time I'd had a proper talk with him, and I must say I behaved with perfect naturalness, just as if he was a Tory MP, which is just about what he is. Every member of the Cabinet is one of Her Majesty's ministers in Her Majesty's government, and are required to swear oaths of personal allegiance, and of course get seals of office, those great metal seals that in the old days were used, I suppose, for imprinting on official documents. In 1975 there was a cabinet reshuffle. Eric Varley was given my job at Industry, and I was made Secretary of State for Energy, and I had to go to the palace with my old seals to get new ones. My son Joshua had used the seals on some sealing wax to leave a lovely impression of them, which I mentioned on that occasion. But the rituals followed in the palace when such events occur are really quite absurd. Wednesday, the 11th of June. At 6 o'clock I went over to the palace to exchange my seals of office. I was a bit of a mess. I had a blue shirt on, which was frayed at the collar, but I like it very much, and my Labour Party tie, and I'd lost a button on my suit, and I was crumpled and messy. But I hadn't realised I'd had to go over, and there'd been a big hoo-ha on the phone about finding the seals of office, and they were sent in. And we went into the Privy Council, and we all had to get down on one knee on a footstool and have the oath administered and go forward. I, of course, was affirmed and kissed hands, and I always put my thumb and kissed my thumb. And we all stood there holding our little red boxes. I mean, it really was ridiculous. So I said, oh, well, my seals, I said, have been used. My son melted down some sealing wax, and we made quite a number of impressions. They're lovely. I wonder if that's legal. Oh, said the Queen, I think they ought to have been defaced by putting a hair across them. So I said, well, good heavens, I know it's an offence to reproduce postage stamps, but I said I haven't attached them to anything. I haven't given myself authority to do anything. And she was slightly shirty about it. So I said, well, perhaps we should have resume the Privy Council and put down a special provision making it legal. And sure enough, when Eric and I opened our seals, mine, the ones he had from me, were all full of sealing wax, and mine were absolute. The new ones from Energy were absolutely clear. I had nothing in them at all. It was really quite funny.
11th of June. 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 11 Royal visits are always hyped up in the press as if they were great popular occasions, whereas in reality the people are invariably kept at a distance. This came out very clearly when the North Sea oil was first brought ashore from the Forties field, and I was included in the royal entourage flown to Scotland for the occasion.
£50,000 has gone on a vast tent, big enough to hold a full-size football pitch, and it took 2 weeks just to put it up outside BP's Aberdeen headquarters. Inside, final preparations were being made for the 1,000 guests being flown in and accommodated at BP's expense. Aberdonians have nicknamed it the Great North Sea Jamboree.
Monday, the 3rd of November, arrived at Aberdeen at 8:30 in the morning, and then we went to Dice, which is the BP headquarters. The first thing I noticed was the actual workers at Dice, that's to say the guys in their yellow plastic work helmets who really bring the oil ashore, were behind a barbed wire fence, just allowed to wave to us as we drove by into the huge tent with 1,000 people, most of whom had been brought from London. And then the Queen went into the computer control room, and I followed at a great distance because Harold was there. And I believe while she was there, she pressed a button. I didn't notice it. Then she went out of the back and into the open air, and there were some Aberdonians, I suppose about 500 of them, spread in the open air behind another fence, with the kids waving little Union Jacks they'd all been given, and the Queen walked in front of them with the Duke of Edinburgh, as if they were animals in the zoo.
The royal party, with the Queen accompanied by Prince Philip and Prince Andrew, was driven right into the marquee. Before the switch on, the Queen left the marquee to meet the families of some of the people most closely connected with the pipeline, those who'd helped to build it.
It is the people who have played a part that matter most. I am delighted, therefore, to have met and talked to some of those, the representatives of many others, who have contributed directly to bringing Forties oil ashore. I offer my sincere congratulations to all concerned in this great enterprise.
When you see the Queen in action, everything else is frozen into this feudal hierarchy with the Queen's private secretary and the Lord Lieutenant and all the old bigwigs who have no power, all brought out into the open as if they were presiding generously over what was a big industrial achievement. The feudal imposition on the whole structure means, of course, that the workers are still left, and it's a disgrace that a Labour government should allow this to happen, are still left as natives and barbarians who can be greeted but have to be kept at a distance. I know there was a security problem, but there was no reason why they should be treated like that. Also, one got this very strong feeling that this great Scottish occasion was just an opportunity for the London establishment to come and lord it over the Scots. But I've always loathed royal occasions, and this even more so. And although I'd played no part in it at all, a Secretary of State for Energy was simply described as being in attendance upon Her Majesty, just as if I was a damn flunky, which I'm not. Oh, I found the thing revolting, really unpleasant. And I was given a little plaque, which looked to me as if it was made of gold, and if it was, it must be worth a couple of £100. I put it in my cupboard along with all the other junk which you collect as a minister, and I'm quite happy to sign off on Monday, the 3rd of November, 1975, recording that at least a quarter of the nation's oil supplies are available from the North Sea.
1977 was the year of the Jubilee, and the Cabinet found time in a busy agenda to consider what gift we should give the Queen. Shirley Williams suggested a saddle. I thought we ought to present her with a leather-bound copy of the Labour Party Constitution, an idea that didn't find much favour with my colleagues. In the event, it was decided to make it a silver coffee pot, and Audrey Callaghan went out and bought it on our behalf, and then we all trooped off to the palace for the presentation by Jim Callaghan, the Prime Minister.
Tuesday, the 5th of July, 1977. I went over to the palace. I was actually the first to arrive. We sort of gathered and I talked to a few people. And we were put in strict pecking order because in the palace, pecking order is everything. Hierarchy is everything. And then we were all lined up in a great semicircle. And the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh came in, and they went round, and I shook hands with the Duke and so on, and the coffee pot was on the table, and Jim stood there, and Jim made a little speech. He said, Ma'am,
The Cabinet considered how we should record your Jubilee, and with respect and affection, if I may say so, we decided to give you a gift, and I looked up precedents, and in Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in 1887, the then Prime Minister, the Marquis of Salisbury, did the same, and he decided to give a portrait of himself, which people laughed. And Jim said this time we felt that it would be better to give you something useful, and although Tony Benn, he said, wondered whether the coffee pot would leak, unlike the Cabinet, laughter, we thought this would be what she would like, and so on. So then the Queen had a little bit of paper, because she can't say good morning without referring to her script, said, Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed. I feel sure that a coffee pot will be more useful than a picture, so laughter and so on. Then Jim came out and said, come and have a word with the Queen, so he ushered Shirley and myself to the Queen. The Queen didn't look frightfully well, her face was pale, and she said she had a cold and might have pneumonia. And I said, old Roy Mason was there, with his booming voice, and he said, Ma'am, the whole of Yorkshire is looking forward to your visit. So damn pompous, I thought. And I said, oh, do let me ask you this. When were Privy Councillors' uniforms last worn at Privy Council? I don't think she really knew much about them. She said, well, I don't think my father wore them. Well, actually, her father wouldn't have worn them because they were worn by Privy Councillors, not by kings. Well, then Shirley, William said, Ma'am, I've often thought it would be helpful if, in addition to reading the papers, which we know you do all the time so carefully, you occasionally had audiences with other ministers, perhaps 2 or 3 ministers, and then you would understand ministers' policies every 3 months, so you'd be able to have an opportunity. Because, of course, Ma'am, said Shirley, and it made my stomach turn, of course, Ma'am, you are so much closer to the people than we are. The Queen said, oh, well, she read all the papers very carefully. Well, I said, the only interest you appear to take in our activities are when we leave the country, because private secretaries come in hot foot and say, the Queen has given permission for you to go to Brussels. I said, you must be frightfully busy. Oh, she said, I do take an interest in that. I'm very interested in that. The Duke of Edinburgh came out. So I said to the Duke, Shirley Williams has been persuaded of your ideas. You may remember we had lunch together at Winfrey. Oh, yes, said the Duke, very good idea. Well, of course, it was a lousy idea. First of all, if the Queen, I had said at the time, I think it's in my diary, if the Queen attended the Cabinet, then when the Cabinet got unpopular, she'd get unpopular. She didn't want to be mixed up with us. Ah, said the Duke, but in Saudi Arabia, you know, King Khalid, he holds court every day. People come and they say, Your Majesty, I haven't got a telephone, and he raises it with his ministers. Now, that's what the monarchy should be like. Then, the most interesting thing of all, really justified going to the palace, was the question of, oh, yes, the common market. Oh, very interesting, this, because the Queen said, oh, we've had the heads of the common market here. We had them to dinner the other night. And she said, Helmut Schmidt was so rude. Well, I said, he always is. I said, yes, but they were also cynical and disillusioned. And he was so rude and unfriendly. And I think it's very interesting somehow. First of all, it confirms what I've long suspected, that the royal family absolutely loathe the common market because they have no role in it. I mean, there isn't a European President's Council at which the Queen and Queen Juliana can meet and the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg. So there's no role, and therefore they are driven back into a sort of quaint little tourist thing, and it's the only head of state she meets whom she neither greets as a foreigner nor as one of her prime ministers, but who's got some sort of power over her kingdom. And also saying they were cynical and disillusioned, which they are. So I thought that was very, very interesting. Stick that away in the memory.